Welcome, everybody. As many of you know, my name is Nikki Lefebvre. I'm the executive director of the Natick Historical Society, and we were established in 1870, and we remain an independent nonprofit. We really thrive off of the support of community members like you. So I offer you much thanks here tonight, as always, for your support to make programs like these possible and all of the work that we do. It is a special pleasure to be here this evening with Amy Sadkin and Dave Parish. We call this the Beat Our Neighbors series, but Amy and Dave are our true neighbors in that we share an actual building over at 58 Elliott Street. So I'm delighted to welcome them and I will introduce them formally soon. But before I do that, I do want to mention some of you may have joined us for the first lecture in our series that's running right now, Indigenous Histories and Futures in Natick, Massachusetts. Our first event was with Professor Daniel Mandel and was focused on the 17th and 18th centuries. If you missed that, you can catch it now today on our YouTube channel, which you can access via our website. There are two more events in that series, one coming up on October 19th. Our speaker will be Professor Jean O'Brien, and the title of her presentation will be Firsting and Lasting, Writing Indians Out of Existence in New England. That's on October 19th. And then on December 14th, we'll have Nipmuc tribal historian and genealogist Pamela Ellis, and she'll be speaking on Indigenous Natick today. You can register for both of those events and more on our website. And I do want to thank Mass Humanities and the Bridge Street Initiative for helping make those programs possible. I also want to mention that the next two events in our Meet Our Neighbors series will be happening in October and November. In October, on the 26th, also a Wednesday evening, we will have Jay Muffinson from Belcom Family Lookout Farm. And then in November, we will have, and this is November 16th, so we're sort of squeezing it in right before Thanksgiving. We will have Greg Stabile of the Natick Outdoor Store. So if you haven't registered for those yet, please do so on our website. You'll also find the dates of upcoming South Natick walking tours and our Walnut Hill tour and more. So let me welcome formally Dave and Amy. Dave Parish and his wife Shirley have lived in Natick for more than 30 years. And although he claims he didn't really know where he lived until he retired, at which point he discovered that he lived in Natick, which is, in fact, as it turns out, a very nice town, Dave feels. Since retirement, Dave has been chair of the Broadmoor Nature Sanctuary, co-chair of the Natick 360 Strategic Planning Process, a member of the Town Open Space Committee, chair of the Natick Housing Authority, on the board of TCAN, and a member of the advisory committee for the recent town master planning process. I'm exhausted thinking about all of that, Dave. His work background includes architecture, community planning, and finance, and this won't surprise many of you, he loves libraries, and we're so glad you do. And Amy, thank you for joining us here tonight. She has been director of the Bacon Free Library for 2.5 years, moving from part-time to full-time just this past July. Prior to working at the Bacon, she was the assistant director of the Morse Institute Library, the Outreach and Community Service Librarians in Framingham, and the director of libraries in Newbury, Mass, Lunenburg, Mass, and Woodstock, Vermont. She came to the library profession later in life after being a stay-at-home mom for 5 years and a part-time veterinary technician for 9 years. In her free time, she enjoys traveling, kayaking, and baking bread from a sourdough starter. And she lives in Sterling, Mass, with her youngest son and 2 cats. Let's give Dave and Amy a warm Zoom welcome. Thank you so much for being here, both of you.
Well, thank Nikki. Nikki, I'll start out and then turn it to Amy shortly. Well, first of all, thank you to our friends at the Historical Society. After 142 years, we may have reached the degree of cooperation and integration that Oliver Bacon could originally envision when you put a library and a historical society together in the same building. Also, it's appropriate to acknowledge our friends at the Morse Institute For the first time in our history, we are not just the Bacon Free Library and the Morris Institute, we are now Natick's libraries, and the increased cooperation between the two institutions has been a very good thing. So let's begin. Okay, let's start with the building and the organization of the Bacon Free Library. The venture began in the home of Mrs. Sarah Griffin Bacon in the 1800s as the Ladies' Social Circle Library. After Mrs. Bacon passed away, her husband Oliver Bacon obtained the land where the library is situated and first built a small library. He then passed away in 1878, and his will established a trust to build and operate a more substantial structure, which is our current library building. In 1908, the Massachusetts legislature passed a statute forming the library as a charitable corporation, and it has operated in that form for well over 100 years. The library is a nonprofit corporation, a Section 501c3, tax-exempt organization, and contributions made are tax deductible. The corporation is managed by a private board of trustees. The town of Natick has provided financial support for the library service since 1951 and funds the salaries of our library director and staff, and also provides financial support for materials and some building-related expenses. Operating costs and maintenance and upkeep of the library building are the responsibility of the nonprofit corporation. The library relies on generous donors and volunteers to operate. For instance, charitable contributions and our endowment fund the library programming, as well as building maintenance and improvements, while volunteers through friends and others, the Friends group specifically, help with programs and special events. In recent years, the Board of Trustees has funded and managed a number of repairs and improvements to the library. A leaky roof was replaced, exterior lighting was upgraded, all the windows in the library section of the library were replaced with those that were more energy efficient and historically appropriate. The interior was painted, the front door and stairs were repaired, damaged sections of the historic fence surrounding the property were repaired, and landscaping around the building has been renewed and supplemented. And now we're about to begin our most critical effort, restoring the library's interior to its former glory. For a building that appears somewhat massive and dark from the outside, the inside is all about light. The windows are numerous and massive, and during the day, the light moves around the building, highlighting every corner and detail of the library's interior. But a key feature is missing. When the building was designed by Robert Shaw, a Boston architect in the Richardsonian tradition, the goal was clearly delight and inspiration, a reflection of the common intent of the books to be contained. When someone entered the building, they were not only invited to look around, but to look up toward the infinite possibilities presented. And that feature was provided by a third floor, ringed with windows and the ever-changing light that cascades into the main section of the library below. Unfortunately, for many years, that experience has not been available to patrons of the library. In order to add a cooling system to the library, the third floor was closed off from the rest of the library, an understandable decision at the time. But we are now in a new age where heating and cooling can be provided by a more efficient and environmentally friendly heat pump system, which would allow us to restore the building to its original, inspiring design. The Board of Trustees has commissioned and received a design for a new heating and cooling system and a plan for removing the current glass ceiling and repairing and restoring the attic section of the library. We now have the opportunity to both modernize the library and regain its former splendor. However, there is a catch. It will be a costly undertaking and we will need help. lots of help to fulfill this vision. Now, Amy, let's hear from you about what is really important: the library staff, resources, and programming.
Hi, thanks, Dave. There are 6 part-time staff and a full-time director at the Bacon, which is open 44 hours a week, in addition to special evening and weekend outreach events and programs. While staffing and library materials are maintained separately from the Morse Institute, there's a great deal of collaboration between the two libraries. Network services, outreach events, programming, marketing, and delivery services between the two libraries and local schools are just some of the ways we are working together to bring library services to the community. We recently completed our 5-year strategic plan. Our mission over the next 5 years is to be a welcoming destination for information, materials, services, and programs in order to strengthen community, provide lifelong learning, and support the educational needs of children in our community. Just to note, the educational needs of children in our community comes from the will of Oliver Bacon. His goal was to help to promote the education of children in Natick. Traditionally, when you think of libraries, you think about books. This was true in 1880 and for a lot of today as well. While we have added many additional services, including many programming options and e-resources as an additional way of providing services and information to the community, books are still well loved and well utilized. Circulation has seen a significant increase over the past 2 years, with physical materials distribution increasing over 9% alone. Curbside pickups, implemented during the COVID pandemic, have proved so popular that the service will continue indefinitely. The Bacon Free Library shares membership in the Minuteman Library Network with the Morse Institute, thus ensuring that all citizens of Natick have access to resource sharing. Use of e-resources soared during the pandemic, and by sharing the cost via network fees, the Natick libraries are able to provide patrons with access to over 76,000 virtual items, the only requirement being a free library card. Programming plays an important role in connecting the Bacon with the community and continues to evolve to include diversified formats utilized during the pandemic. Virtual formats allow increased opportunities for patrons to access programs both locally and worldwide. Bacon staff currently offer popular outdoor programs for children and adults on the site's historical grounds along the Charles River. Virtual offerings have included conversations with local community members, a Bhutanese citizen regarding the pandemic, trivia nights, an interview with Ukrainian citizens, programs in concert with our seed lending library, story hours, and gardening programs, as well as partnering with libraries statewide in order to provide access to many diverse offerings. The library also offers 5 hybrid book clubs monthly and a cinephile movie night. In-person programs are now being started up, and they include art openings and a children's craft program. And as the weather continues to cool, we will start adding more of those in. Our outdoor children's story hours typically see between 24 and 34 attendees, and some of our special summer programs for children topped over 100 people. So we will be continuing to offer programs for all ages in a variety of formats in order to meet the needs of the community. Along with the Morse Institute, the Bacon Free Library went fine-free in 2021 to ensure free and equitable access to materials, programs, and services for all. Deliveries between the Natick libraries was implemented 2 years ago and continues on a daily basis, providing patrons with library materials from either library within a 24-hour period. There were 2,463 curbside pickups in fiscal year 21. The service will be continued in order to meet patron demand for these services and to help make the Bacon Free Library collections accessible to all. Program collaborations with the Natick Historical Society, the Morse Institute, Natick Community Gardens, Natick Council on Aging, and the town of Natick and local organizations ensures that everyone has access to the Bacon's diversified programming. And now I'd like to turn it back over to our board chair, Dave Parish.
Thank you very much, Amy. In my earlier comments, I left out a critical issue related to the library. Some of you may have noticed. The library was built upon a Native American burial ground. The indigenous people who lived here for millennia before the arrival of the Europeans chose land facing water to bury their dead. For many people, water is an essential mystical element, representing both change and continuity. The arrival of Europeans on the American continent was a shattering event. The Europeans brought diseases that decimated whole communities and a culture that couldn't have been more difficult and different from that of the indigenous tribes. The result was conflict, death, and disposition, with Natick as its center. And ultimately, these events led to the acquisition by Oliver Bacon of the land upon which the Bacon Free Library is now built. I won't go into the specifics of the conflict or the land transactions. The Historical Society is a far better source for that information. But I will venture that we haven't yet learned how to think about, talk about, or respond to what happened here. I doubt anyone is unaware of the debate about removing the spillway on the river adjacent to the library, a debate that will or should include a discussion of how to recognize the Native people who lived here and live here still. However, our concern as a library is not merely recognition, but learning and ultimately action. Books not only teach, they light fires. Our climate is changing rapidly with calamitous results, and our careless exploitation of natural resources drives the change. The Native Americans who lived here lived with a culture of respect for nature and an understanding of the requirements of sustainability. It is worth asking, what would our world be like if Europeans had come with a desire to learn and understand rather than convert and subjugate? I think Amy and I would be delighted to take any questions that you may have, and we'll answer them as best we can.
Well, thank you both, Amy and David. That was really thoughtful and lovely. I appreciate it very much. And I think I will invite anyone who has a question to please send it through the chat function. You can send that directly to me, or you can raise your hand, use the raise hand function. And you can find that under the ellipses or under I think it's called the reactions button. So please feel free to send your questions my way, and also signal me directly on the screen if you'd like to do that. But Amy and Dave, I can get us started here with a question. I wonder, the Bacon Free Library, when in fact, I just had a group here recently, they see the name Bacon Free Library and they sort of don't understand it, right? And they said, well, why is it called the Bacon Free Library? And I explained, the origin of the name. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the sort of naming and the connection to the Bacon family a bit more, what you've learned about them, and how often do you find yourselves explaining the name of the library, or is it so commonly known in Natick at this point that you don't ever have to explain it?
Maybe
This, by the way, was a group visiting from out of state, so I'll clarify that. So this may not be something you encounter very often, but
I'll pick up on the culinary aspects, but you can.
Okay, I think a lot of the questions do come from out of staters or people that aren't local, because locally, maybe I'm assuming incorrectly, but a lot of the people are aware of the Bacon name. But yeah, I think we've heard an awful lot of jokes about free bacon and freeing bacon and everything along those lines. A lot of questions about why bacon is free at the library, and people, and we explain that it's just it's a local family name, and he was our benefactor and has given us what we have today.
It's really, it's in terms of the benefactor. I mean, it really, on a personal level, is a lovely story. It has to do with his wife and her love of books and her interest in putting together a group of women who could read together and discuss together. And, we certainly don't know the discussions between she and her husband, but he obviously noted and loved that fact also. And, he was active in helping her establish a small library initially, and then, made a very generous donation, surprisingly, not just to build the library, but also to endow it. And, that's a feature that's often overlooked when people do something like this. People are focused on the building, but don't focus upon the need for it to stay together over time. And although the endowment wasn't large in our dollar amounts today, it was substantial at the time, and it's grown over many years. And it's been extremely helpful. And the Board of Trustees of the library, I've been pleased at the response of the Board of Trustees, is that I've worked with some organizations where the endowment was untouchable. And we've touched it here, and we've had to sometimes. When the roof is leaking, you can't wait the 6 months to raise the money to fix the roof. So it's been extremely fortunate to have that. It's been extremely fortunate to have the building that Mr. Bacon endowed. And it's an iconic building. It's a really interesting building for people who love buildings, who love architecture. It's really a unique feature of Natick and a unique feature for the area. And it is reflective of the time when it was built. It has some of the elements. You can see some of the similar elements when you walk around some of the buildings at Wellesley College. And the architect was also busy, well, not busy. He didn't build a lot of buildings, but in the Back Bay of Boston. So it's a wonderful building. It's a building worth preserving. And there is, as I mentioned earlier, the remarkable issue attached to it in that this building is in fact built upon a burial ground. And that's not an insignificant factor and something that we really need to continue to work to find the best way to express.
Right. And we're with you. I have lots of questions pouring into the chat now, and a lot of interest in the plans for the third floor and the rendering that you shared, which is just stunning. And let's see, do you have plans for that space, or like how would it be used? Would it be just about opening up the area, or would it be accessible? Will books be stored up there? Will it be open to the public? What's sort of the vision for how that space is used? And I'm sort of combining a couple of questions here, but if you can elaborate any more on the vision for that space beyond the absolutely stunning image that you shared, which gets me very excited to see. Go ahead.
Well, it's a great question. And I'm interpreting plans two ways. One, yes, we do have plans. We have architectural plans, and we're quite a long ways along in the process, which has been very exciting and interesting to learn more about the building physically from the building itself. So that's been delightful. In terms of the use, the primary impact will be opening it up so you can both look up and see how the building was originally designed, and also feel this inspired part of the building, which was the way light will play about the building as a result of that. And the whole effect it'll have on people when they enter the library and have the opportunity to look up and see all of that. Unfortunately, the public won't be allowed there, probably, unless we can find an insurance agent we haven't found up to this point. There's a staircase that goes up that hasn't met a code in 100 years. And it's no place that children would be allowed, although it's clearly will be a child's fantasy of exactly what a building should be. We will use it for some storage. It will be accessible to the Board of Trustees and to the librarians, but it will primarily be a focus in terms of just the delight that will come out of the original plan for the building. Amy, do you want to add to that?
I think we're excited to have that happen. People come in all the time. We receive a lot of tourists and visitors, and they come in and they're amazed by the beauty of the building. And then they look at the spiral staircase and they look up and say, "What's up there?" So that happens probably several times a week. So being able to open that up and have more light inside, it'll be amazing.
Just another part, just quickly to mention, is the whole redoing of the heating and air conditioning system, and that we're doing all we can to make this building and the land around it as environmentally friendly as we can. And the heat pump system will be much more efficient than the current gas system that we have, and won't pollute to the same extent that it does. Heat pump systems are complex and there are questions associated with that, but we have the design for that, and it appears that we can do so inobtrusively. We've had some preliminary discussions with the Natick Historical Society. Those are always interesting discussions, but it appears that we're on the right track here. Long answer to a simple question.
No, that's wonderful. And I think I'll just share anecdotally in the context of a patron. I know my children who think of that as the octopus up on the windows. That's the story Fran always told. They will miss the octopus, but I think the rest of us grown-ups will not miss the octopus one of these days, right? So some other questions here while we're thinking a little bit about energy efficiency and less pollution. Noting the gardening efforts around the building and the status of is it native plants status? Can you talk a little bit about the efforts behind the gardening and the focus on sort of native plantings? And I know you also have the seed library. So is there sort of a conscious choice here, I think, to focus on encouraging green thinking and a focus on native plants? Any comments on that?
Yeah, it's been a delightful effort. It's something we've enjoyed spending time on as a board. We've also spent a lot of time watering the plants, by the way, but it's sort of a transition. There are a relatively large number of fairly mature bushes around the library, azaleas and rhododendron and so on, that are in good condition, have been very pretty over the years, and they will stay. But probably about a year and a half ago, we hired a local consultant, a woman who's fabulous, who helped us think through how we might supplement the plantings that were there, again, focused upon native plants. And that's what we've done, and that's what we'll continue to do. We'll continue to, modify this, improve it as time goes on. And again, hearkening back to this whole question about the removal of the spillway, that one of the things that we're interested in is finding a way to coordinate what we're doing with what might be done there. And with the primary goal of making this whole area, not just the library, not just the spillway or lack thereof, but the whole area as attractive as possible, and really see if we can come up with something that still is a place that draws people, that people have affection for. And for those who are on the winning or losing side of the debate about whether the spillway stays or goes, will still have something they can be very proud about and very pleased to be a part of.
Wonderful. And I do have another question here. Did the board or the BFL have a position within the repair versus removal conversation?
We did not. We didn't take a position as a board. We each have individual opinions, and we discussed them a lot among ourselves, but we didn't think it was appropriate for us to take a position. But just a shout out to the committee. I mean, it was just a remarkably good process. And I think we can all be grateful for how well that was conducted.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have, Amy, this is perhaps a question for you. The Bacon Free Library runs a number of book clubs, and I wonder if you could say a bit about them and sort of their role in the life of the library.
Sure. There are 5. There's the Mystery Book Club. There is don't quote me on the days and the times. There is the
everybody
history.
Can go to the website for the days.
Yes, thank you. There's the History Book Club, which we have in collaboration with the Historical Society. There's a Tuesday evening book club that has met, I believe, now for 14 years.
Wow.
So that is ongoing. Fran was running that, and she has come back after her retirement to continue with that for a few more times. The Mystery Book Club is run by Casey. And the Historical Book Club is run by you and by Maria. And then we have a nonfiction book club run by Karen on Saturdays. And that just started meeting both in person and on Zoom. And then we have the Environmental Book Club, which is run by a person that's at the Mass Audubon Society, but we host it on our Zoom, and Graciela runs that one. So they meet once a month. They are all fairly well attended, and they've been ongoing for a number of years. They met in person before COVID, and then everything went virtual, and they continued to meet throughout the whole thing. And now we're back meeting in a hybrid format, so everybody can keep coming however they feel comfortable attending.
That's wonderful. Well, I know if anyone is with us tonight because they love history, the History Book Club is a lot of fun. I always enjoy our conversations. It's a great group, and then you never know who else might join at any given meeting. So it's wonderful. I also have a question that looks into the thinking about the history of libraries generally. The word free. Why is that part of the title of the library? You know, was there a time when libraries were not free? Can you say anything about that?
Sure. When the Bacon first started out, and a lot of libraries started out privately before it became the Bacon, when it was in a separate organization, people used to have to join or be invited to join a library when they were private. But then when they became public institutions and they were funded by the towns that they represented, or in different parts of the country, the counties where they were represented, they became free. I believe the first free public library was in Philadelphia. And the idea was for everyone to have equal access to information. That didn't matter if you were rich or you were poor, what language you spoke, where you came from. You were welcome in the library. You were welcome to ask questions. You could check out materials with no one asking you what you were checking out. It would be private. Patron privacy is very important in libraries, so that you feel comfortable being able to ask questions, to go in and ask a librarian for any kind of information or any kind of book that you would be interested in. So it's a great thing. It's one of the few free institutions, public institutions still around, where you're able to walk in and everybody is equal and can access equal information.
A while ago, the Board of Trustees challenged Amy and the staff to come up with a list of the things that are free at the Bacon Free Library. It's a staggering list. I won't go through all of it now, but there are just so many things that are available to people, and they're all free. And it's wonderful for that perspective. I mean, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I just get tired of being nickeled and dimed every place you go now. You know, somebody's trying to sell you a subscription or, you know, whatever. But come to the Bacon and we won't charge you. Maybe this is just an opportunity to just talk very quickly about the difference between the Board of Trustees and the library function itself. And it's a little bit unusual in that the Board of Trustees is a separate organization, and our responsibility is essentially the building and the grounds. We don't have any management oversight in terms of the staff of the library. The staff of the library are employees of the town of Natick. We communicate constantly, and obviously we do our best to give the library and librarians a good building in which to work, and the librarians do good work within that building, but they are somewhat separate. And in recognition of that, the Board of Trustees is putting together a web page for the Board of Trustees so we can talk about some of the things that we're doing and the way we want to do some things as an independent nonprofit corporation, which allows us to approach things slightly differently than the people who are employees of the town of Natick. It's been a delightful relationship. I've been involved in a lot of nonprofits, in some times in a chairmanship and supervisory role, and it hasn't always been the delight of my life to be in that position. In this one, to be able to focus on the building and know that there's a good professional staff that's doing a really good job, and I don't really need to be concerned about it, nor does the board, because they're doing it, for one, and number two, it's not our responsibility anyway, and number three, most important point, is we're not librarians. We don't know how to run a library. Librarians do, and so that's a big distinction.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a really helpful clarification. Thank you, Dave. And I also, I have to say that for me, I think it's really powerful and important that the word free remains in the title of the library. I imagine that some other libraries have sort of removed that over time. And I think it's a lovely reminder not to take for granted all that libraries can bring to a community. So I'm glad it remains. And I do have I'm going to tie together another couple questions here, which is about children, and wonder if you can say anything about sort of where that emphasis came from, and we saw in your mission statement, it continues today. Is that something that you see always being a part of the Bacon, as sort of a special focus on children, or is that something that is sort of part of an ongoing conversation about the mission?
I see it as always being an important part of it throughout all of its history. There has been a large children's collection and a focus when programming became part of library services, a focus on children's programming. Because of the size, the location, just the feel of the Bacon, we've always been very successful with children's programming, especially with the 0 to 5-year-olds. We've been very lucky to have some great children's librarians, and it just has that warm, safe space where parents, caregivers feel comfortable bringing very small children. It's kind of, built for them to come in, and they can't get lost, and it's their size, and it just works out very well. And with the children's program in that age group has really benefited. They can run around on the beautiful grounds, and they can't get into too much trouble. And and it's part of Oliver Bacon's will. He had expressed an interest in children, and ensuring that the Bacon's mission would encompass children and to provide services for them and the education of them.
I think, again, from a building perspective, the building is sort of a child's fantasy, that, there's just something about the way it's built, the way it opens itself up, what it feels like to be inside of it. I've been there a number of times when some of the children's programs are going on, and it's just obvious the delight they take in the space. So I think that just exactly what Amy said, that there seems to be something about the building, something about the grounds, something about the history that makes it very congenial. Just one quick story. I was talking to a neighbor a while ago whose son went to the Bacon, and he was a young man who obviously very smart. He was, I don't know exactly how old he was, but he was having a lot of trouble in school. He was very withdrawn and he had difficulty talking up and just being a part of the group and so on. And so she took her son down to the Bacon and put him under Fran's wing. And Fran began to work her magic. And he also had the opportunity to read to a dog. And the dog seemed quite interested in what he was saying and didn't criticize his pronunciation or anything like that. Make a long story short, it was a life transformed. Really, he's completely different at this point.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that story. And I also have a child who has done the Read to a Dog program at the Bacon, and it's wonderful. It's a really special and powerful thing, especially at this age, at the age where they're really just beginning to kind of learn how to read themselves, and builds that confidence. And I think I'll say, we've taken up so much of your time and really appreciate it. And I feel very grateful that I always have two hats when I get to be at the Bacon, and one is as your professional neighbor downstairs, but the other is as a mom and an actual neighbor to the Bacon. And I think that the building, but also the staff within, always make it such a special place for, I think, children, especially, and families to come and visit. It has a special feel that I think larger libraries just couldn't have, because there's more people and more space. And so I'm very grateful to everyone who continues to make it such a wonderfully welcoming neighborhood library. It's very special. We're lucky to have it. And thanks so much to both of you for joining us tonight and telling us a bit about the history and very exciting future of the Bacon Free Library.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for being here. We will let you know when the recording is available, and have a wonderful night.